Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Ways of the World, where we focus upon a different country and culture and discover the different ways of the world through the lenses of Villanova students and faculty. These Villanovans have studied abroad and are here to share their experiences. I'm your host, Ava Petrosky. Today, we will be exploring Australia, and with me here today, I have a Villanova University junior, Carina Hosford, who spent a whole semester abroad in Australia. So thank you so much for being here, Carina.
Thanks for having me, Ava.
Absolutely. Tell me about Australia.
Oh my gosh, it was so amazing. The program I did, it's called Rainforest Reef and Cultural Ecology. It's through SIT Abroad, which is based in Vermont, but they do sort of in-the-field programs throughout the world. And the one I was on, we spent time in the rainforest, out on the reef, and the cultural ecology part was a camping trip with Aboriginal elders. So those were sort of the three sections. And then the fourth section was the second half of the program was a research portion. So we found an advisor in Australia and did research for about a month to a month and a half of our time there. And yeah, it was super cool.
How did you get into this program? It sounds so unique.
I had been looking for something sort of like this. I knew I wanted, to go to Australia or New Zealand. I'd been there once before with my family and loved it. And so when I started looking into it, I found SIT, and they had two programs in Australia. And originally I was actually going to go to the other one in Byron Bay, but that one was more sustainability focused, and I saw the reef aspect on the one I ended up doing, and yeah, decided that was the one.
So what did you find in your research?
So I was looking at crown of thorn starfish, which are starfish on the Great Barrier Reef that eat the coral, and they, when there's outbreaks, they have sort of a problem with damaging the reef, along with bleaching and cyclones and other things. So I was looking at the health of the crown of thorns on the reefs around a small research island called Lizard Island in Queensland, Australia. So I was looking at the nutritional, condition of them. So I went out and tried to find them in the reef, and when we did find them, we would take some in-water observation data, and then I would collect them, bring them back to the lab at the research station, and dissect them, look at their digestive tract, and the color of their digestive tract, which is really cool, shows how they're doing nutritionally. So if it was darker, then they were starving or not as healthy, and the lighter ones were healthier. So it was just sort of getting a sense of the condition of those crown of thorns.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, what's your major at Villanova? Does this relate to your field of study?
Yeah, so I'm an environmental studies major, so it does relate. But it was a little bit more, obviously it was research, which is usually considered more sciencey, but it was really cool to get that opportunity and that experience of experiencing sort of research. And we were staying at the research station too, so we met people who have been going there for years to get their data sets, and the owners or the operators of the station were super nice. And sort of got to see the life inside a research station too, which was really cool.
So what city or town were you predominantly located in?
We were based in Cairns, which is northeast in Queensland. And we were based there, but we went out, they called them excursions when we weren't in Cairns. So we spent about 10 days in the rainforest, about a week camping, and then the whole group was on Lizard Island for about 10 days, and then I stayed on to do my research with two other girls. So I was there for about 5.5 or 6 weeks. But yeah, so we were based in Cairns, but didn't actually spend much time there.
Did you see a lot of wildlife while you were in the rainforest and camping?
Yeah, more in the rainforest. When we were camping, we were staying on a station, which is sort of like a farm, or like a ranch, I guess. Mm-hmm. So there was horses and cows and that kind of thing, but it was all domesticated. But it was so fun, and we didn't have our phones or any technology, any watches or anything, so we never knew what time it was, and we were just hanging out, and yeah, it was super cool. And how often do you get to be fully off the grid? Pretty much never. So it was super fun to be able to do that. And then in the rainforest, we focused on birds. We saw a lot of birds. But we also saw snakes and possums and a whole bunch of things.
Do you like animals?
Yeah.
Okay. So the snakes didn't freak you out?
I wouldn't have said I liked snakes going into it, that's for sure. But they were like, the one we saw, actually we saw a few, but they were always like, they weren't coming after you or anything. And there was one that was just hanging out on a log, so that one was really cool to see. Mm-hmm. And it felt very sort of, even though we were out in the rainforest, it felt like a very controlled setting, which was nice to see them. Mm-hmm. But yes, now I would say maybe I like snakes.
Did you see any kangaroo or any other animals that are native to Australia?
We did. We saw kangaroos. I will say that the kangaroos were more in they have a bunch of wildlife habitat sanctuaries, which is really cool. So we didn't see any kangaroos just hopping around on the side of the road. For the most part, they were all, well, I guess but they were mostly all in these sanctuaries. But yeah, they were just hanging out there. And I think they're far more calm in those areas. I've heard that if you encounter them in the wild, they can be kind of mean. But they were super, super cool, and you could pet some of them. So,
Aww.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Did you take any courses along with the research?
Yeah, so it was broken down into 3 courses technically. But since it was all sort of in the field, the research obviously was separate because it was time, separated by time. But the other 2 was sort of a research methods class and a ecology class on rainforest, reef, and cultural ecology. But they were so mixed that on it, every time there was an assignment, I had no idea where it was going. And classes, some of our classes were, we would go for a hike and our professors would lead us through the hike and talk about the animals that we were seeing. So it was definitely different than any class experience I've ever had. Mm-hmm. But yes, technically they were broken up into courses.
Did you have the opportunity to maybe do any side travel on weekends?
So not on weekends. Since it was a field project, we didn't really have weekends. We were pretty much in class or doing something most weekends. We would have a couple days off sort of here and there. On one of those days off, we took a bus about an hour south, I believe, to a beach, and that was lovely. But that was the travel we did sort of in between. And then the research I did, we had to leave Lizard Island for another group to come in. And so we had these 2 weeks before the research period ended, and we had to be back in Cairns to meet up with the rest of our program. So the 2 girls and I went to Tasmania. So we did that, which was super fun. And then beforehand, my older sister flew over with me, and we did a little road trip up the coast from Sydney to Brisbane for about a week. So
Awesome.
Got to see some of the country through that. Yeah, so that was super cool.
So for our viewers that don't know, where is Tasmania?
It's off the southern coast of Australia. It is not too far though. I think it's about an hour flight from Melbourne. But yeah, super easy to get to, but it's so different because we were up in the tropics for almost the whole program. And so being down there, it felt, more wintry, I guess. But I mean, it was still 60 degrees because it was their summer. But yeah, so it was so totally different, but super cool to be able to see that too.
What'd you do there?
We had to write the paper on the research. So we did that a little bit, but sort of in between that, we went hiking. We went out to Tasman National Park, which is a little ways out of the main city of Hobart. And so we spent a little while in Hobart, and then we went outside to Tasman National Park and did some hikes there. One day we did a day trip to Maria Island, which is this island where they have wombats just roaming around. And you can go say hi, but not touch them because apparently they bite. But yeah, so we just hung out with the wombats, went for a hike there. That was super fun. And then some other hikes around the national park. And then in Hobart, we just sort of walked around, explored. They have a big market on Saturdays. So we went to the market, which was so fun. And then there's a mountain outside of Hobart called Mount Wellington. So we hiked that one day. So sort of some hiking, some writing, some exploring. It was good.
And then what about Sydney and Brisbane? What'd you do over there?
Yeah, so we flew into Sydney, and we were only there for a night. So we explored a little, and then we pretty much crashed. And then we drove, and we made a couple stops along the way in we had a camper van type thing. So we were just stopping in holiday parks and campsites, that kind of thing along the way. So we went to a bunch of little places. Byron Bay we went to, which was lovely. It was a little surf town. It was super fun. And then we ended up in Brisbane. we didn't spend much time out of there. That was just where we were flying out of. But yeah, so we just sort of walked around these places. We did a kayaking thing in Byron Bay and a sort of a whale watch tour another time, which was super fun. And yeah, other than that, just sort of exploring on our own.
That's cool. Now, I want to know, how long is the flight over there? What was your flight pattern?
We flew from Boston to LA, which is about 6, I'd say. And then we flew from LA to Sydney, which is about 15 or 16. Okay. So it was definitely a long day, and you miss a day because you crossed the date line. So yeah, you land in Sydney and you sort of have no idea where you are. But luckily we slept on the way, so we were sort of a little bit better set up.
Yeah, that's necessary. Now, what's the time difference?
It's 16 hours.
Okay.
But also we had daylight savings in the middle of the semester. And only some of Australia does daylight savings. They do it by state there. So our time difference compared to other states in Australia changed, which was really confusing. But yeah, to the US, it was 16 hours.
Mm. Did you find it hard to adjust?
No, honestly, because we slept pretty much the whole flight there, time difference wasn't too bad. There were obviously a couple days where we were sort of we have no idea what we're doing. But yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Okay, good. Now, how many Villanovans were with you on the program?
There was one other kid from Villanova who I hadn't met before, but so with the exception of a couple people, everyone went in not knowing anyone, but it was super fun. Everyone was so nice, so it was a good experience.
Do you still talk to everyone?
We're still a little bit in touch. Actually, our director just sent us a picture of a flooded street near one of the Aboriginal elders' house that had a crocodile hanging out in it. So it's some random things like that, but yeah.
There's so much wildlife, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Always encountering it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are some must-see landmarks in all of Australia that you feel are, if you go, you have to visit?
The big one, especially near Cairns, is the reef. Cairns is really the jumping off point for the reef. A lot of the tours go out of there. So depending on where you go, it's about an hour, I'd say an hour boat ride. And there's so many tourism companies that do it, but about an hour boat ride, you go out, you snorkel a couple places, then you come back. But yeah, the reef is just amazing. And I would say that's the top one. Some others, I think Sydney's really cool. We spend a little while there. The Opera House and everything is just beautiful. I'd say those are the big ones. Mm-hmm. Tasmania, too. If you can get to Tasmania, it's a little harder to get to, but that was amazing.
Awesome. Now, what is the weather over there?
We, sort of by chance, I didn't even know this, but we were there in the dry season, which was lucky because it started being the wet season the last week or so we were there, and it rained every day. So I'm not sure how the kids in the spring do it, or the spring our time do it. But yeah, so it was there sort of spring into summer. And we were in the tropics, so it was, hot, humid, and 80 to 90 degrees every day. But it really depends. Australia is obviously huge, so in Tasmania it was cooler, and in other places it's totally different. But yeah, that's what it was in Cairns.
What is something about Australia that really surprised you?
I think what surprised me is how different every place is. Obviously I knew it was big, but even still, just driving up the coast, you saw it change. Sydney's obviously a big city, and I had been there once before with my family, and we went to sort of, the western coast, and that was really different than even the eastern coast. So I think just sort of how different it was, and how much I hadn't remembered about it from the first time. Mm-hmm.
If you could describe Australia in just 3 words, what words would you choose and why?
Oh my gosh, this is hard. Okay, I think I would say bright because, well, first of all, it's really sunny. In the dry season, it's really sunny, which is awesome. But also just the culture and everything is so lively, and and a lot of Aboriginal art uses fun colors and these fun patterns that we got to learn about. So yeah, I would say bright, and then maybe exciting. There's always something, if it's a spider in your bedroom or fish that you're seeing on the Great Barrier Reef, there's always something. Keeps you on your toes for sure. And maybe for the last one, like really welcoming. I always felt like, I mean, you know, there's the whole like American tourist thing, which obviously is kind of everywhere, but everyone I met was super nice. And yeah, you sort of felt like, especially with the Aboriginal camping trip that we did with the Aboriginal elders, like they welcomed us into their culture and like told us their stories and everything, which was really cool to be able to, you know, hear a small fraction of one culture of Aboriginal people. But yeah, so I'd say that, and it was super cool to be able to sort of get a little sense of what that's like.
What's one story that you heard that just stuck with you?
They have this rainbow serpent that in Uncle Russ is the name of the Aboriginal elder who we were with. And Uncle Russ told us about how this rainbow serpent, like in the stories that in his culture, the rainbow serpent sort of comes after anyone who misuses resources, like if they don't use the whole animal or whatever it is, or if they're just killing the animal for sport or in some inappropriate way, the rainbow serpent comes after them. And I thought that was really interesting. And a big part of their culture is sort of maintaining resources and maintaining the world around them. So yeah, that was really cool.
Now, I do have to go back and ask, you said you said it was exciting because there might have been a spider in your bedroom. How many of those did you find?
Only one in the bedroom.
Okay.
That was our first encounter with huntsman spiders, which the problem was it was above my friend's bunk bed, and we'd gotten into bed. We were all about to go to bed. Lights were off, whatever. And she looks up, and then she's whispering to this other girl. You know, we all kind of are going to bed, but we all sit up, and we're like, oh, like, is everything okay, whatever. She points above her head, and there's this massive spider. And we were like, oh my gosh, like, we don't know if that's a tarantula. We don't know. It was like week 2, I think, of being in Australia. So we have no idea. It could be the most benign thing ever, or it could be like poisonous if you touch it, or like if it bites you. But yeah, so we had no idea what it was. So luckily we called in some reinforcements. They got the spider out, which was very kind of them. And yeah, but there was definitely some screaming, definitely some confusion over what we were going to do. We ended up getting it. I was not a part of this, but they ended up getting it with, I think, like some container they found and a stick and standing on the bunk beds. But yeah, that was the only one in the bedroom that we found. There were a bunch, especially out at Lizard Island. They were everywhere. They were, you know, in the shower, on the door handle to the bathroom, just sort of in the kitchen. One was like on a coffee maker one morning, so you just kind of scooted them off. But yeah, we definitely got used to them by the end, but the first encounter was a good one.
So if you have arachnophobia, do you recommend going to Australia?
You can definitely do it.
Okay.
I think you can definitely do it in a different way. Like, you know, I think in city, like I never saw a spider in cities, but yeah, the sort of the more rainforesty or like remote areas, I think there might be some spiders.
Yeah. Now, let's pivot away from that. I'm sure that no 2 days looked alike, but if you could walk me through just a typical day in your life, what would that look like?
Yeah, so I guess for like the research, because that was really where we spent the most time. So these 2 other girls and I, we are in, well, first of all, the houses are like, there's 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and then bathrooms. And so when the whole group was there, the other bedrooms were other kids in the program. But after they left and it was just the 3 of us, there were other research teams in those. So, you know, we'd sort of get up and sometimes end up eating breakfast or some meal with them, which was super fun. And they were very nice and very sort of patient with us as we navigated our first research experience. And they've done this for years. But yeah, we'd get up and usually pretty early, make some breakfast, and then usually we'd head down into the classroom. There was a classroom at the research station, and we would hang out in there, get our like data sheets for the day ready, that kind of thing. And then we'd head out. Sometimes, I mean, it really ranged how long we were out there for, but for 4 to 6 hours, I'd say it was sort of a more normal day. And we'd head out to whatever reef we were on that day and hop in. We had to wear these one-piece stinger suits, which was really cute. Really exciting. And, we had our little slates with our data sheets on them with waterproof paper and that kind of thing. We had these transect tapes that we did to collect data on the substrate of the reef. We'd hop in depending on the day. Typically, we'd collect some substrate data, and then they were very patient and very lovely as they waited for me to hunt for the crown of thorns, which sometimes you just sort of run into them, which was a little bit spooky because they were scary looking. But other times, we'd be looking for an hour and finally find one. So we do that, and the academic director gave me a set of tongs, literally grilling tongs. They said grill on them. And so I'd be out there with the tongs and, you're diving around. They leave these marks on the coral though, so you can, they're white marks because they've eaten the tissue of the coral. So you're sort of diving around those to try to find them. And usually they're sometimes they're nowhere near one, but usually they're somewhat near a feeding scar, they're called. And then, so sometimes, it would be an hour before we found one. And then, dive down, try to grab it. Usually took a couple tries, grab it, bring it back to the boat, put it in just a bucket on the boat. And then, we'd eat lunch on the boat or go back in and get more data typically, and then head back to the research station. And usually, if I had collected one, bring it to the lab and dissect it, and then head up. Usually at that point, it was sort of evening-ish or late afternoon, get showered, get changed, and head to and make dinner. But sometimes we'd head down to the beach for sunset, and usually a lot of the researchers gathered there, which was really fun to sort of, we never talked to all of them, but to sort of hear how everyone's days was, and sometimes the operators of the station would be down there, and they were so friendly and they loved to hear about everyone's days and what we did out on the water. So that was super fun. And then if it was a Saturday, there's a sort of a barbecue on the beach type thing. So those were really fun. And we'd sit and chat and then head back. And we did some puzzles in the evenings usually puzzles or play a game. We got really into Monopoly Deal at the end, because one of the other researchers had a deck. Puzzle, play a game, head to bed, and repeat the next day.
Obviously, I'm assuming there were no language barriers for you to overcome, but did anyone respond to your accents?
There was definitely some, where are you guys from? And honestly, some of the Australian accents, we'd be looking around and we'd be like, we have no idea what's being said. It's English, but it's totally words we would have understood. Mm-hmm. But some of the accents were pretty strong, and so I'm sure they felt the same with us. We didn't. For the most part, it was good.
What was some of the cuisine that you had over there? Did you find it different than America? Do they have any signatures?
Yeah, so a lot of it was really similar. And we were in Cairns, which is a city-ish, a small city. And so, we had Thai food, and they had sort of anything you could want. And I don't think we got to experience sort of the more traditional cultural meals for sure. So I would say it was pretty similar. Now I'm sure what we didn't experience may have been different, but yeah.
If you could redo any aspect of your abroad experience, what would it be and why?
I don't know. I feel maybe doing more travel. I would say it wasn't really feasible. But I would say there's so much more to Australia I would love to explore. So somehow fitting that in would have been fun. A friend of mine and I did go to New Zealand after, so that was really cool to be there. So we did travel around Australia, but I'd say more time in other states of Australia would have been really fun.
What'd you do in New Zealand?
We rented this truck with a tent on top and just drove around the South Island. We landed in Queenstown and drove to Milford Sound, which is in a national park, and then we went to Mount Cook and did this boat tour on the glacial lake where there were all these icebergs, which was really fun, and got to see the glacier from there. And then actually we were supposed to do a hike the next day, but it was closed for like all these warnings. So we didn't like avalanche warnings, like gale force winds. So we're like, okay, we won't do that hike.
Right.
But then we went over to Kaikoura, which is on the other coast of the South Island of New Zealand, and we swim with dolphins over there, and it's like a little sort of coastal surf town type thing. So that was really fun. We spent a couple days over there, and then we ended in Christchurch, which is where we flew out of, and yeah, didn't do much there, but just explored a little bit.
Collectively, how long were you gone for? It sounds like a little bit longer than a semester.
Yeah, so I left about a week, I left August 20th, I left, and then I didn't get back until New Year's Day, actually. January 1st is when I landed back. So I met my family in French Polynesia, and we did the holidays over there, which was amazing. I mean, it's so cool over there. But yeah, so it was definitely, we sort of pushed it to its bounds of how much time I could spend in that part of the world, which was amazing.
How were your holidays?
So cool. We were in Tahiti and Moorea and another island called Huahine, and I mean, it's literally Moana over there. They like pointed out things and they were like, that's what that's from in Moana. So yeah, I mean, you're like basically on the set of that movie the whole time, which is beautiful.
You were gone for almost half a year.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel homesick?
For sure. I mean, there were definitely times where it's the longest I've gone without seeing my family. And so there were definitely times where, you know, they'd all be together like Thanksgiving or something like that. And you're like, oh, like, wish I could be there. But it was more wish I could be two places at once. I was luckily never feeling like I didn't want to be in Australia, which I think I was fortunate enough to not have that experience, which was nice.
Yeah. Did you find it hard to assimilate back to America?
Sort of harder than I thought. It was, I mean, at that point I was just so drained that like when I landed, there were definitely a couple days of like the time adjustment back was I think harder. And there's still some things that I'm like, oh, like, that's kind of funny. I haven't done that in a while. Or, you know, like, there was a whole semester at school. And so people will bring up things that I'm just like, okay, wait, can we back up? But everyone's been super nice and backing up and explaining everything to me. But yeah, so not too bad. But definitely, you know, you never think it's going to be adjustment coming home. Everyone warns you. But I will say they're probably right. But yeah, you never really think about that in the first place.
Definitely. Looking at your whole trip, what's one of your favorite memories that you made?
I think one of my favorite memories was, it was our last night on Lizard Island, and we were just playing this Monopoly deal game with the two other girls who I was with and the other research team that was in the house at that point. And Anne, who's the woman who operates the station, she was there. And we were just chatting, and they were pulling out crazy stories of things they've done in their career, like, so crazy. And it was just so cool to hear like everything they've done and everything that, you know, environmental science and the surrounding fields hold. And it just felt like a little community over there. And Anne is like a grandmotherly character. She was so sweet, but also so impressive in her professional work. So it was really cool to have that experience.
If you could show me one picture to summarize your whole trip, or maybe just your favorite picture that you've taken on your trip, what would it be? There's
a couple pictures of us just driving our little boat on Lizard Island, just the three of us. And one of the other girls and I had to get our boating licenses over there. So, I mean, it was literally just the three of us on the boat. None of our advisor wasn't on the island or anything. So it was just us. We're just motoring out to our little snorkel spot for the day. We're motoring home. And it's just so fun. It's like, that already feels like it sort of was a dream. Like, it feels like it never happened. It was just so peaceful and such a little calm it's a little calm piece of the world. And, you know, there's obviously major world events happening, but you sort of felt like you were on your own little place, which you really were. I mean, you had to there was nothing on this island other than a resort and the research station. So all our food came by barge every 2 weeks, and there was no stores and that kind of thing. So you really were in your own little world, but you could see the mainland. So you weren't crazy out there, and there was Wi-Fi and everything, so it wasn't crazy. But yeah, I'd say that picture would probably sum it up.
If you could write a book about your abroad experience, what would you title it?
This one's hard. I don't know. I feel like Maybe the Queensland is known as the like their like name, the US has it too, but their name is the Sunshine State, and I might name it that. Just I feel like first of all, we had great weather. We super lucked out with the weather. And also just the whole culture sort of feels like sunshine sometimes, and everyone we met at the research station was so welcoming and everything. Back to my 3 words. But yeah, so I'd say maybe the Sunshine State.
I would read it. Now, my final question for you, Carina, is if any of our viewers are aspiring to travel to Australia, what would you advise them?
I would say go. It's so amazing. No matter where you go, there's something different everywhere. So definitely figure out sort of what you want to do. Because I think sometimes, I did this too. Like I had no idea how different every place was. But sometimes everyone thinks that, if you go to Sydney, then the Great Barrier Reef is right there, which it's not, but it's definitely doable. But it involves a flight and everything. So definitely do your research and figure out where you want to go and what you want to do, what parts of it you want to do. But yeah, if you can get over to that part of the world at all, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carina, for coming and sharing with us that unique, different part of the world that a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to see. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I'm your host, Ava Petrosky. Stay tuned for next week.